Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webcast. My name is Kirstin Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is September 20th, and we will hear, this is a special event. We love this. Regenerative City Symposium, Innovation Towards Sustainability Success. So we're an hour early today, but this is going to be an exciting program. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type those in the Q&A box and I will do my best to answer them. For questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the Q&A box. We will get to those at the end of the presentation during a Q&A period. If your question is for a particular panelist, it would be helpful if you stated who you wanted to answer that question. Don't raise your hand, just type your question in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to those again at the end. Today is a collaboration between the APA Sustainable Communities Division and APA's International Division. So this is an exciting event collaboration today, and we're happy to have you all here. Today's session is worth 1.5 CM credits and one of the Sustainability and Resilience credits. You can log your CMs by heading over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, so be sure to like us. And we record all of our sessions and we post them up onto our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and just type in Planning Webcast in the search. We'll pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So that's the end of my housekeeping items. Again, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A box. Head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast for all of our upcoming sessions that we have available for you to register for. We are solidifying the end of our fall lineup, so I will be posting a whole lot of registration links probably sometime next week, including, yes, law and ethics. They are coming, I promise. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Scott, to kick things off. And you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Kirstin. Let's see. Would you like to? Thank you, Kirstin, for that orientation and for supporting this webinar with your APA webcast service. Good morning and welcome, everybody, to the Regenerative City Symposium. We're excited to be here today to present and discuss a set of intriguing propositions, new ideas, and practices to continue to move urban sustainability forward. And now I'd like Carla and Tim will make a few introductory remarks from our organizational sponsors before we get into the content. So Carla, you can unmute.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. The Sustainable Communities Division of APA is excited to partner with the International Division to bring this group of experts to you, talking about how we may all strive to create a regenerative city. As you all know, collaboration is the name of the game in planning work, especially now with large unwieldy challenges, such as creating communities that are safe and livable and comfortable in the face of extreme weather and other climate challenges, the challenge to create opportunities where there's social and economic disparity. The Sustainable Communities Division is doubling down on its commitment to address these challenges in service to our members and in support of the national APA policy and programming in these areas. If you are a SCD member, I invite you to email me for a link to our virtual annual business meeting, which is next Friday at 12 noon Eastern. I can be reached at carla@ebenbach.com. And I will now pass it over to Tim Van Epp to represent the International Division.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Scott. I'm Tim Van Epp, longtime member of the International Division, former chair of the division. And one of our functions as the International Division is to apply many of the expertises and strengths of the other divisions in an international context. And in this regard, one of the impetuses for this particular webinar has been our work in Ukraine. The division has a Ukraine Rebuilding Action Group, or we call it URAG. And we have been working with some stakeholders in Ukraine. And one of the things that we've been doing is preparing what we call sustainability planning guidelines that are hopefully applicable in Ukraine. And as part of the guidelines, Scott prepared a regenerative city section. It's part 2 of the guidelines, which you can find at sustainability.urag.org. And it's part 2 if you go to that website. And for those of you who have joined, who have an interest in Ukraine, our URAG members, stakeholders, partners, friends, what our intent is to use this webinar as practice for putting on something similar for Ukraine stakeholders specifically. So look forward to that, and thanks very much for joining. I'll hand it back.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim and Carla. I'm just going to run through our agenda briefly. We're going to end this welcome section with this review of the agenda. I will go into a 10 to 15 minute introduction on Regenerative City, and then we'll shift into panel presentations by our urban sustainability innovators and distinguished group. We've got Kirstin Miller from EcoCity Builders, Timothy Beatley from Biophilic Cities, Vatsal Bhatt from USGBC and lead for cities and communities, Charles Kelly from Green Urban Design, Julio Carrillo from Planning 2050 Initiative, and myself from SF Planning and my own initiative on Sustainability 2030. And then we'll go into a discussion and audience Q&A and close out. So now I'd like to introduce the symposium and the characteristics of a regenerative city approach to set the stage for our presentation and discussion. This regenerative city perspective arose over a career-long search for authentic sustainability. I found that each approach contributes something, but did not produce the ultimate result. I began to question our operative theory of change. That is, the sum of ad hoc innovation would eventually accumulate to sustainability success, with my central question always being how to achieve the result. And our questions today are whether we have a sustainability predicament that requires a new approach, a shift of approach, the nature of that new approach if needed, and how we can move forward practically, whether it's needed or not. This perspective arose from a wide range of inquiry work and related professional development that I pursued principally from 2005 onwards, but also earlier. In particular, I was an advisor to the SF Community Sustainability Plan in 95, 96, and led preparation of its economic section. This plan was the second US City Sustainability Initiative following Rio in 92. I proposed to the board and led the Sustainability Committee for the APA California Northern section from 2011 to 2012, and was an APA SCD Sustainability Champion in 2014. This wide-ranging inquiry connected a lot of dots across practices that led to seeing new patterns, configurations, and implications for practice that I'm presenting today for your consideration as the context for our panelists' presentations of their innovations and our subsequent discussion. To begin, let's review sustainability performance to date. How are we doing? After 30 years of practice, we seem to be winning battles, but not the war. Trends indicate accelerating life support system insecurity. There are many reports on this challenge. We have an annual Earth Overshoot Day. This year it was August 1st, 2024, and we're consuming 1.75 Earths per year. In fact, to the point, in an incidental ISSP newsletter post I found in my inbox yesterday was a quote from Mathis Wagernagel of Global Footprint fame. The largest Ponzi scheme ever may be our global overshoot of our planet's regenerative capacity by at least 70%. That may be an unfair characterization, as it's hard to find one agent gaming one system, but the larger point is accurate, with the key implication being that we cannot grow our current economy without crashing nature, and then also, obviously, our economy. In addition, our current approach may not produce sustainability, at least in time. Thus, we may face a sustainability practice predicament. What to do? Maybe we need a new approach. After all, since sustainability is a systems state, a systems condition, not a part, maybe we need to start producing system sustainability instead of ad hoc innovation around parts. This Regenerative City Symposium will introduce us to a new perspective on urban sustainability, a possible new approach arising from the ad hoc innovation in green planning design over the past 25 plus years in response to the climate and sustainability challenge. It creates the potential for the built environment to make essential contributions towards this climate and sustainability success and prosperity. The question to us then becomes, is the potential worth realizing, and will we realize it if so? There appears to be an historical arc of urban sustainability innovation that holds all of our work, with an internal logic pointing towards regenerative cities and sustainability. But realizing that potential is not predestined, it's not mechanical, it's up to us to plan, design, and produce it. This symposium explores some powerful resources for responding now with this new approach and the understanding required for climate and sustainability success. But first, let's clarify the meaning of regenerative city. The adjective began to be used in the 90s and 2000s. A Google search reveals frequency of use, with regenerative design the most used, and the phrase regenerative city much less used, but maybe it's beginning to trend. Reviewing use of the phrase revealed more often reference to an environmentally friendly city, less often to an environmentally restorative city. But descriptions did not include and indicate how to produce it. This symposium proposes a distinct meaning that includes some operational points. A regenerative city is an environmentally and economically net positive city whose built environment is planned and designed to mimic nature's economy as the foundation for climate and sustainability success and prosperity. With this definition in mind, an arc of urban sustainability innovation can be characterized as stretching from the economic city of planning in pre-1970s to the ecological city, then the sustainable city, then the livable, resilient city, even biophilic city of today's planning, with the accumulating internal ecological design logic pointing towards the potential for the ecological economic city. In other words, the regenerative city of tomorrow that we need today. The roots of regenerative city reach back to traditional environmentalism and natural resource conservation, and then expand to systems thinking, the biophilic hypothesis, various ecological approaches, including economics and industrial design, all pointing towards the planning potential for the ecological economic city, the regenerative city with a truly circular economy. The challenge to us as planners, then, if we see value in this emerging approach, is how to shift from net negative business as usual to the emerging net positive regenerative approach. This emerging approach is not widely recognized, therefore it's not pursued routinely, and as a result, it's not highly visible for emulation. Fortunately, we can begin now. We can simply catch the wave of the emerging approach. There's no need to invent it anew. It's already bubbling up in our practices. In planning, we formulate the policies and rules for producing the regenerative settlements, ecodistricts, cities, regions, using biophilic planning and design to connect health and land use. In urban design, we're adding water and habitat, biophilia, to the urban design palette to create high-performance living places as part of a living system urban metabolism. In architecture, we're prioritizing energy efficiency to enable the renewable energy economy with the 2030 challenge and other initiatives using passive house and other building technology, and using biophilia to create living buildings, walls, and roofs. In landscape architecture, we're shifting from aesthetics to habitat creation for biodiversity and human health. Again, biophilic planning and design in living city regions. In utilities, we're shifting from gray to green urban infrastructure with nature-based solutions and ecosystem services to create living urban and regional metabolism. Cities around the world are now innovating towards regenerative urbanism with bold programs and projects, and we can join them, but what would it take? More specifically, how would we do it? This familiar graph illustrates the proposed shift from net negative to positive and indicates progress, but it does not show how to shift. To do so, we must stop simply reducing impacts and start eliminating impacts at their source by redesigning the materials and processes of our economy. We redefine understanding and practice of sustainability around regeneration as the core principle and producing regenerative built environments, metabolism, and economy as the core practice. We expand our focus from silos to systems to connect the human economy and society to the biosphere's living system, not with net negative impact mitigation as we do now, but at the foundational level of shared operating principles and systems performance imperatives that produce the system sustainability and success. We can use our legacy portfolio of green planning and design innovation as a whole package to gain the full benefit if we would only stop value engineering them out or not use them otherwise. We can use and continue to invent new tools, such as the living community patterns developed for San Francisco's existing built neighborhoods in a planning study with the International Living Future Institute, conducted to develop a program to enhance existing neighborhood sustainability, reweave that fabric with regenerative living system urban design using blue-green streets and other living community patterns to transform existing neighborhoods for sustainability success. We can use big ideas to make big moves to change the context of districts and whole cities and regions, such as district water, biophilic infrastructure and ecosystem services, connecting resources and energy across scales, integrated utility hubs, all to build a transformational value proposition. And then we can use modern GIS, geodesign, procedural modeling, and system simulation tools to enable the next generation of systems planning and design practice with the capacity to quickly learn, test, and then scale new planning and design ideas for regenerative cities and sustainability. Then we make the key move. We connect sustainability planning and design practice to achieving the imperatives of regenerative living system sustainability performance. Doing so produces system sustainability, our goal and need. But what are these imperatives? They are simply put and familiar: 100% renewable energy economy, 100% organic food production, no pollution and no waste by design, 100% continuous materials cycling by design for de- and reconstruction in the material choice and production processes of a circular ecological economy. And then no destruction of nature, in other words, natural capital, only reinvestment and enhancement, and making decisions based on full costs, internalizing externalities. In short, this is a biosystems mimicry approach that creates the regenerative built environment, which is part of and in turn spurs the creation of the larger circular ecological economy of sustainability. Doing so expands both ecological and economic carrying capacity by design, by transforming linear flows in the current human system that produce waste and use up finite resources by design into circular flows that produce no waste and use infinitely regenerated resources by design, while continually increasing productivity through innovation. In other words, doing more with less. Now, I want to amplify this key point because expanding both carrying capacities creates whole systems, real wealth, prosperity, and abundance. It's the holy grail of environmentalism. We can now have both jobs and environment, and we no longer need to address the false trade-off of practical yesteryear policy or well-intentioned but impractical idealism. And note, we cannot transition instantly, but without understanding the implication, we will never work towards it and realize it. This new approach can be integrated into a reinvented strategic comprehensive urban planning method. It would specify and pursue the innovation and investment program needed to create regenerative built environments and the larger circular ecological economy, with the production capacity required for global inclusive prosperity without negative environmental impacts. In doing so, it would restore damaged nature, reverse climate change in time, expand human and natural system productivity, defend against the hostile conditions until climate recalibrates, and create great livable places, cities, and regions. It's the only solution for the twin challenges of accelerating climate change and unsustainability. In summary, regenerative city and sustainability produces system sustainability, the regenerative built environment, and the circular ecological economy, all required for success. This set is necessary to solve simultaneously the interrelated challenges of accelerating climate change and deteriorating sustainability. But they will eliminate GHG emissions, but also create the ecological economic system needed for continued development and prosperity. And doing so is an essential quid pro quo for the global collaboration required to reverse climate change. It's insufficient just to eliminate GHG emissions. In conclusion, the regenerative city and sustainability approach can be seen as an exit strategy from net negative to net positive and sustainability success. However, success requires our recognition, learning, use, innovation, and advancement of the new approach. It will not happen on its own. Fortunately, this emerging innovation is robust, powerful, and accelerating, as we'll see as we turn to our panel presentation and discussions. Presenters' innovations contain substantial regenerative city content and direction, including the energy required to move up the arc of urban sustainability innovation. With the stage now set, we'll hear from our seasoned urban sustainability innovation practitioners who have been blazing their paths from net negative to net positive in the trenches of planning practice. They each involve different but overlapping areas and practices, phases of the sustainability response, and perspectives on the challenge. However, it's important to note that these innovations practitioners did not simply create individual innovations or techniques, which we discussed in the introduction just now. They've created complete packages or programs of innovation that we can use now to quickly learn, build capacity, and continue or accelerate moving towards success. They each have different flavors, but they share core concepts of ecological city planning and design. On that note, Kirstin, you're up first. Let me stop sharing my screen and you can share yours and unmute your mic.
Thank you.
Now, Kirstin, I've been following your work with EcoCity builders in this ecological city space since I was an undergraduate student in UCB's Conservation and Natural Resource Program almost 50 years ago. It was the obvious extension of the environmental movement to the city, urban planning and design, which EcoCity builders foresaw and foreshadowed. But please say more about how you saw the issue you were addressing at the time, how it and your response have changed over time, and how you see the challenge and needed response today.
All right, I will. Thank you so much, Scott. It's really great to be here on this panel, especially. So I'm going to just share with you some of the perspectives, kind of going back to the 1970s and before I was with the organization, but it kind of has a nice, pretty deep history that I think kind of dovetails into what we're talking about today with regenerative concepts. So EcoCity Builders is a nonprofit, and it goes back to the environmentalist movement of the 1970s, and different architects, urban planners, city activists, including, importantly, Richard Register. They were quite fascinated with this idea of arcology, which was Paolo Soleri, the Italian architect, urbanist, and philosopher's concept of the kind of combination of architecture and the environment or ecology. And Richard and some other urbanists would go out to Arizona and, hang out with Paolo Soleri, hear about his ideas, and then they started to form these groups. One was Arcology Circle back in Berkeley, California, to talk about how they could bring these important ideas about the built environment and the natural environment into existing cities. So Richard founded a group called Urban Ecology in early 1970s. And then he went on to found EcoCity Builders in 1990. And they just started a practice of really imagining how their own neighborhoods could be changed from business as usual to more ecological. So they were weaving in these concepts and ideas that they were taking from the environmental movement, from people like Solari, and they were advocating these things from the ground up in their own neighborhoods. And Richard's books and his writings really were complemented by a lot of illustrations that he was doing that I think really helped spark in people's minds what it might look like. And these little sketches you see here are imagining the transformation in Berkeley around Shattuck Avenue. I can't remember what cross street, but probably some of you know it, near the French Hotel. So these were things that were starting to sort of take shape on the ground in Berkeley, and then shared in other communities around the Bay Area in San Francisco and other places. There were movements to daylight urban streams, to create early slow streets, to actually depave, like pry up pavement and plant community gardens. So there was a lot of the spirit was that we can do this as communities, and that citizens were kind of like ground zero and so important to engage in any type of successful process or outcome. And then, so that was sort of setting the stage, like you asked about, Scott. And then how things changed over time is there was more thinking about how to communicate what had been happening in Berkeley and the Bay Area to a broader audience. And part of that was influenced by the start of an international conference series, which has now been held 14 times since 1990 around the world. So there were more people, international people, interested in how they could replicate some of these successes. And we wanted to really hone in on this concept of what is an eco-city. So there were a lot of meetings, some hosted in Vancouver. And so people like William Rees, Sebastian Moffat, Dr. Jenny Moore, Matthias Wackernagel, Richard, myself, and others were having some meetings, and we were coming up with a more of like a complete idea about the complete urban ecosystem as a regional system that had a built environment, and then it had flows moving from outside, meeting demands and moving from nature to nature specifically. So we also delved more into these flows, and there was a lot of talk. It's around the 2010 to 2016. There's a lot of talk about the urban metabolism, and we really thought that was a useful tool as well. So we started to create these mass balance Sankey diagrams to show different flows. So water flows, energy flows, food, materials, but they were all using the same kind of a standard way to look at them. So the sources, the nature, how they were converted, meeting demands from people, living in cities, reconverted somehow or not, and then ending back in nature. So that was another. Okay. So that became a way that we could communicate these concepts in a broader level. And then we started to take this more on the road. So over the past, I would say, 15 or so years, we've been using these actually more internationally than in California. So here's an example of us using these system flows in a project in Cairo in Egypt. We're still working on a pretty big project with Morocco, but now we're integrating new tools. So we're using the smart code and we're adapting that. We're using digital twins and we're working, on a pretty broad scale with new cities. And then this one, just I'll end with this concept reinterpreted by Nepali people working with Kathmandu and Lalitpur in Nepal. And so it's just one of the things I want to leave my segment with is that how we see this changing right now is that the more adaptable we can be in letting in different ideas and letting new talent kind of come through and pick up some of these pieces, I think the more successful we are. So like linking our different approaches and finding the similarities is working. So that's my presentation, and I look forward to the rest of the panel discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirstin. That was fascinating. Tim, please share your screen and unmute your mic.
Okay.
I've been following your work since I attended a sustainability symposium at Stanford in the mid-90s, where you were presenting your recent research on European city sustainability. And I was pleased to cross paths again in 2011-13 as the lead planner for San Francisco Planning's participation in your International Biophilic Cities Research Project and to launch the Biophilic Cities Network with you and the rest of the steering committee in 2013, which has grown and thrived over the last 11 years. I hope you can share your experience in conceiving and launching and cultivating this important new dimension of urban planning and design, not to mention it being a core component of regenerative cities and regions, and talk a little about where you've taken it. So Tim, take it away, please.
Great, sure. Hope you can see the screen. Thanks so much. Yeah, and it's great to follow Kirstin. I have to say, EcoCity, the EcoCity work has been inspiring to us, and Richard Register's, foundational work is a lot of what we're doing today. I think is owed to his wonderful work, and the making the drawings and the imagery, making it are kind of giving a visual expression to what a EcoCity or a biophilic city could look like is really important. So we started this network in 2013, Scott saying. It is founded around this idea of biophilia. I have to give a lot of credit to E.O. Wilson. Ed Wilson at Harvard wasn't the first person to use the term biophilia, but he's really the one who's coined it in the way that we think of it, that we have co-evolved with nature. Nature is hardwired in us. We're carrying with us our ancient brains. We are happier, healthier, able to lead more meaningful lives when we have nature all around us. So the notion of a biophilic city is really one where we think that nature is not something to be visited once or twice a year on a vacation, some faraway place. It has to be all around us, and we have to be immersed in that nature. So that's at the heart of this idea of a biophilic city. If I forget, please take a look at biophiliccities.org. The network does some marvelous things. We have an online journal, Biophilic Cities Journal. We write books, we make films. I'm going to mention a couple of those films. We organize events, we have webinars, we have monthly partner city calls, and we have about 32 cities now around the world that have officially joined our network as partner cities, several thousand individual members, several hundred organizations. So very much connected to the scholarship, the literature and studies that show the power of nature. We know that in the presence of nature, depression goes down, anxiety goes down, our mood improves, cognitive performance goes up. You have evidence now that that in the presence of nature, we're more likely to be generous, we're more likely to be cooperative, to think longer term. You can make a pretty good case that in the presence of nature, we are better human beings. We often in the network talk about these things in terms of the word flourishing, which captures both the pleasure and delight that we get from having nature around us, but also that deeper meaning, a deeper connection to place and environment and to each other. So that's at the heart of it. If I had to describe the kind of other key qualities of a biophilic city, again, immersive nature, integrated, continuous, and seamless. We want that green roof to connect to that canopy that connects to lower level nature that connects to parks. So we are immersed in nature, and the vision is really one of not just a city that has discrete places of nature that you visit, but rather, again, being immersed in nature. We want to move from seeing a city as a place where there are little places of nature or parks to living in the park or living in the garden or living in the forest. It's all of these things, the integration of built and natural environments, certainly whole of city, we sometimes say, room or rooftop to region or bioregion, and all of the nature in between. It's also a whole of life. You should have that contact with nature in the beginning of your life and through your life into elderhood. It is a culture of biophilia. It's not just the presence or absence of nature, but how much do we care about that nature? How much do we know about it? Are we able to identify common species of flora and fauna? Are we engaged in the regeneration or restoration of that nature in our cities? And increasingly, it's about justice, right? It's about we know that there is not a fair distribution of nature experiences in our cities, and that's a key element. It's about biodiversity and wildness, all the things on this, on that graphic, on that slide. It is very much about crafting a new vision. Singapore, one of our original partner cities, for many, many years, of course, called itself a garden city. More recently, it has shifted that motto, calling itself a city in a garden. In a garden, which sounds like a small change, but really quite profoundly different. And then coming out of the pandemic, they are now calling themselves a city in nature. So this idea, again, of overcoming this perceived separation between humans and the natural environment, living within a natural system, which a city is, and being immersed in that nature. So I'd love for you to go see our webpage, biophiliccities.org. These 32 or so cities are doing remarkable things. Each city is different. In our network, you join and you have a curated page on our webpage, so you can go and see, get a lot more information about any of the cities we're talking about today. So in the little bit of remaining time I have left, I have 3 cities that I want to offer as examples of regenerative work and regenerative thinking. I've mentioned Singapore already. These are images of a project in Singapore called Kampong Admiralty, but it's meant to represent the larger policy of what Singapore calls its landscape replacement approach or landscape replacement policy. When you build a new building, you are now required to at least replace the nature at ground level with nature in the vertical realm. And there's sort of this friendly competition now between builders and architects to see how much more nature you can incorporate into that vertical realm. In this building, you see it's a mixed use elder housing, social housing project, a number of wonderful qualities, but it has a tiered forested roof. So you look down, it's essentially a rainforest. It's adding more nature than it takes away. And that's what of course, we want to see. Another example is their effort to renaturalize rivers and streams. The Kallang River, which you see here, used to be a hard surface engineered flood control project. You see it on the upper left. We have a film about this if you're interested. It is now a meandering, beautiful, biodiverse river, retaining and managing floodwater in a really remarkable way. And it's been a large part of why the 80 or so smooth-coated otters have now returned to the city. A second example.
Time, Tim.
One minute or it's time?
Sure. Take a minute.
1 minute. Okay. Wellington, New Zealand. A wonderful project called Zealandia in the middle of the city, predator-proof fence around that natural area to regenerate, allow the forest to regenerate and actually repopulate the native birds. And been remarkably successful. So people are seeing cuckoos and other parrots in their front yard they haven't seen in a generation. We need to be thinking about spaces for regeneration in cities. And also the kiwi is now returned to Wellington. My last example, 10, 15 seconds, is Busan, our most recent city in our network, joined this summer. A whole wonderful story about regeneration of Korea's forests following the Korean War. 70% of the country now is in protected forested mountains, and the city is bringing those forests into the city. this pioneering this idea of wind path forests, actually planting new forest to actually facilitate the movement of air through the city. Happy to say more about it. This was going to be my last slide. This is one of our films. I'm going to turn off the sound, but I do want to just introduce the idea of regenerative awe. A lot of what we're doing is to facilitate the experience of awe. We will not have awe without birds and without trees and without the regeneration of our ecosystems and natural landscapes. And it also then provides the public support for a lot of the regeneration work that we're trying to do in cities. Okay, sorry to go a little bit long. That's it. Do take a look at biophiliccities.org. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much, Tim.
I'm speeding up. I was speeding.
Incredibly inspiring and rich as usual. So unshare and mute, and then Vatsal, please share your screen and unmute your mic. You and I met recently through our work on the APA International Division's Climate and Sustainability Working Group for the Symposium. I was hopeful but not overly optimistic when LEED first launched in 2000 as a voluntary green building certification standard for the real estate development industry. However, it's been a tremendous success, and I was pleased and excited to see your addition of the LEED for Cities and Communities certification program in 2016 or so. You've also had tremendous uptake with this program around the world. Please describe the genesis of your initiative and program and your experience growing it and how you see it unfolding into the future. Take it away, Vatsal.
Thank you so much, Scott, for this invitation, putting us all together, and APA ID and SCD, as well as APA Ohio, for hosting us and bringing us all together. Mainly, I think, as you have summarized, Scott, this is an initiative of US Green Building Council, and we call it LEED for Cities and Communities. And you have known, most of you may have known about LEED for Buildings, and we have LEED for Interiors as well. So that is where I joined USGBC from Brookhaven National Laboratory to develop this new rating system called LEED for Cities and Communities. And we launched it in December 2016. And ultimately, our interest was to really connect up interiors to buildings to communities and cities. And I think the ultimate interest is to really see how we can talk about resilience and healthy and places. And I think that is where the point is to become a catalyst to really make these concepts operational. And that is where you would see that we have so far more than 420 cities and communities registered, more than 210 are certified. We have a lot of communities that are also working with us globally, as you can see, and the number is more than 225. So I think the point here is that when we talk about cities and communities, we capture 4 different aspects of these cities and communities that are in planning and designing phase, as well as existing. So with that thought process, I thought to focus more on actionable outcomes, solutions, and practices that are being done by the community projects that we have globally. And I think we all see that action on ground is more important. Like I'm talking to Climate Week next week, and there the main theme is talking about it's time. In COPs, as you might have seen, it's about time that we try to showcase progress and outcomes. So I think that is where we want to showcase these rating systems that are comprehensive, looking into a lot of different aspects and priorities that we all have in our mind. We want to really make them operational. So that is where we are starting with, right from integrative planning to natural systems and ecology, the regenerative part of it there, as well as conservation, resilience, looking into transportation and land use, talking about walkability, bikeability, 15-minute city kind of priorities. At the same time, smart mobility, water efficiency use, as well as reuse, and trying to talk about net zero water or net zero energy and greenhouse gas emissions, and talking about how do we look into materials and resources and go to net zero waste and circularity and so on and so forth, as well as quality of life is an integral part of it. So I would try to show you a couple other examples of this kind of rating systems as well. But these are the examples of more than 100 projects that are working on plan and design phase. These projects are anywhere between 5-10 acres to 20, 30, 100, 2,000, 20,000 acres, and they differ in size and shape and format. So I think that is where what we rating system that we have designing are trying to implement globally. You can see 3 square kilometer project in China. This is Land Lease Old World Expo 2015 project getting redeveloped by Land Lease, Brazil project. This is Madrid Nuevo Norte, 235 hectares project at the north of Madrid. This is 110-acre old golf course brownfield redevelopment with 1,000 jobs and 1,000 households, affordable quite a bit. Recently, Minnesota Green Bank gave its first finance to the geothermal system here. Siemensstadt, Siemens original headquarters, they are redeveloping it. This is another part of it called Lead for Communities existing, where we are trying to talk about performance, and trying to make a baseline with this data so that we can try to talk about improvements in that delta. And how do we talk about similar priorities are applied to Lead for Cities existing as well. But you can see on the left, Madrid Nuevo Norte, a 30 acres project in the heart of Milan, and Bosco Verticale, Stefano Boeri's 2 signature first 2 apartment complexes are there. In the center, developers, Howard Hughes, 28,000 acre, 22,000 acre projects in Houston, Nevada, and elsewhere. On the right, I want to talk about Guatemala project called Condado Naranjo. And this is again 10,000 people working, living 7,000 people working there, and so on and so forth. And on the right bottom, it's Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village in Lower Manhattan, where Blackstone Group and Ivanhoe have backstopped it. And they are trying to really refurbish their entire development, 110 buildings, nearly 27,000 people. And historic complexes like Balboa Park are also working with us. And then San Francisco Airport and some of the theme parks are trying to work with us to talk about their priorities. Here, we are talking about some of these communities that are in large-scale city developments. And you can see these are 50 square kilometer, 100 square kilometer areas. So I would like to pause here very quickly, and if at all you need more information about many of such case studies, you can look up some of these links that I have highlighted, and Scott and Christine are going to send you some of these slides as well. But looking forward to working with you, and I have tried to put in a lot of slides behind these slides as well, which would show you a lot of such examples and many other aspects of our rating system. So let me try to quickly pause here. And thank you for giving us this opportunity. Looking forward to discussing them more during our Q&A session. Thanks, Scott, and everybody.
Thank you, Vatsal. That was inspiring and impressive. Please stop sharing and mute. And Charles, please share your screen and unmute. You and I, Charles, met through a social event that your firm hosted for an EcoDistrict Institute training program in Portland in 2014 that I attended with the San Francisco team. As our initial conversation unfolded, I was impressed with your routine urban design practice involving so much innovation, which in my experience was the exception, not the rule, particularly back then. I subsequently invited you to present to SF Planning, and we've been working together ever since on this regenerative city sustainability idea. Your practice has involved sharing US green urban design innovation internationally in Asia and the Pacific Rim, as well as practicing domestically. And internationally, you've seen a tremendous receptivity to and local practice of regenerative city-related concepts and practices, often different from and ahead of the US practice. So please describe your experience working in this green planning and urban innovation space domestically and internationally over the past 30 years, and how you've seen it evolve, key features, and where you see the leading edge headed now.
Terrific, Scott. No, it's my pleasure to present, and I've always appreciated our partnership working on this concept. This presentation that I'm presenting is called Regenerating Recovery Through Urban Design, largely because most of my 40 years practicing urban design has seen urban design really evolve, and it's evolved. But one thing that's been constant is the sense of recovery. There's always an aspect of recovery, and that's because urban design is really the tool by which neighborhoods plan their open space system to generate social cohesion and economic sustainability for communities. And you'll see that in these three examples. One, we'll talk about recovery from air and water pollution in Portland. We'll talk about recovery from economic malaise, super aging, population decline in Kashiwanoha, outside of Tokyo, and then come back to Portland, look how Lower Albina is seeking to recover from urban renewal policies of the 50s and 60s. But Portland's story really starts at the tailpipe when people started coming to cities by car and thinking the single person occupancy was the best way to live in a suburban environment. And Portland found itself in a consent decree needing to correct that and change that behavior. And they did so by some policy plans to restrict parking in the downtown, but also a physical plan to make a mix of uses in downtown that was connected by a transit mall that permeated across the city to the destinations that people wanted to achieve in their commute, and then got people to take bus and transit and expand multimodal access to the city. And voila, we were able to reduce the number of roadways and put those into green space, such as waterfront parks, speaking to Tim Beatley's presentation. But the challenge was when you went to the waterfront, you would see all these sewer overflows. And so the consent decree by the EPA challenged Portland to recover from this phenomena, which they responded by making a watershed-based, innovative best management practice concept to take the load of the peak out of the sewer system that was overflowing into the sewer, and creating a watershed concept that now lets us swim in the river. So if you look at Portland, you come to Portland, you wonder what Portland was known for, it was really the experience you had when those three kinds of projects kind of came together and was expressed in the public realm with nature, with economic activity and social uplift, and generating carbon reductions, against the national average, which were pretty phenomenal. When Japan was interested in using this kind of watershed land use and transportation concept to add economic vitality to their bedroom community station areas along the Tsukuba Express outside of Tokyo. And they used this as a national model to demonstrate how neighborhood scale was the best scale to address national imperatives of super aging, population decline, unplanned disasters like Tohoku earthquake, power outages, et cetera, because they felt that having strong, sustained economy and social cohesion could generate and would be able to regenerate its response and recovery. And they used the open space system, and they to make open space system effectively, they had to create. They created a first ever coordinating entity that helped translate community aspirations and convert them into projects that the public and private sector could do jointly. And in so doing, they were able to use a comprehensive data system to certify as the largest LEED and D Platinum certified project in the world, smart city in the world, and use the landscape to create resilience in the community across residential and economic objectives. And then coming back to Portland with some of these ideas in mind, and respecting the trauma that the historic Black Albina community experienced with urban renewal and transportation planning, we look to Albina Vision Trust leadership in imagining a new neighborhood that restores that neighborhood, that social and economic capital that's combined in a neighborhood. And ZGF, when I was there leading the independent assessment, we helped ODOT understand how to extend that across highway coverage to reconnect areas of the city. Because AVT was really saying, hey, this is not enough. And what we can need to do is imagine a neighborhood where the most marginalized communities are reflected in the built environment and participate in the wealth generated as owners of homes and businesses. And imagining how that could extend across the highway cover as an open space system connecting commercial and social goals. And then finally, just coming to the end, I want you all to be optimistic, because when a community becomes to believe they can change their, improve their livability, they can set the table using urban design to give communities the tools to configure their spaces between buildings in new ways, to transition to new governance systems, and to promote the outcomes through stewardship. So please be optimistic and letting me give the opportunity to thank you. looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Charles. Provocative as usual. Please stop sharing and mute. Julio, you're up next. Please share your screen and unmute your mic. You and I met recently through this symposium and the APA International Division. However, I've been keenly following your formulation and launch of Planning 2050 over the past few years from idea to organization. It seems to me that your creative contribution is bringing together a systems approach, data analytics, and actionable strategies into one package, one practice. That is, paraphrasing from your website, intended for the long-term transformation of planning practice to advance issues related to social equity, climate change, and resiliency. Now, this is a bold vision and a timely undertaking. It strikes me potentially even as a modernized pattern language, a la Christopher Alexander, for sustainability. If you would, please share your experience conceiving and launching this effort, how you expect to manage it to results in the coming years, and how audience members and others can participate and contribute. And you might also underline the data analytics component, which is a key new characteristic of our profession's next generation planning and design practice. Julio, please take it away.
Absolutely. Like you said, one ring to rule them all sort of approach. I'm gonna introduce this, like you said, is a very comprehensive, aspirational, and hopefully everybody gets inspired to participate in this. So my name is Julio Carrillo. I'm senior planner with Park Hill's community sector. Park Hill is an architecture engineering firm with offices in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. I'm based in Austin, Texas. And I'm also an active member of the APA Sustainable Communities Division and the APA International Division. And Planning 2050 was born within the Sustainable Communities Division. I'm currently leading the effort of the initiative, but would love to invite you all to be part of it. There are various ways to get involved, so I'll share my contact at the end of this presentation so you can reach out personally with this exciting and transformational initiative. And I mean, when I say transformational, I mean it. I really mean it. I don't think there is anything like this in planning practice today in 2024, a place in time where AI and algorithms are already part of our daily lives. I want to start presenting this idea of the clustering of big amounts of data, the concept behind the clustering algorithms, who nowadays does not have a Netflix account, right? Has it happened to you just like me that it only took Netflix for me to watch the Squid Game to start getting all these recommendations of Korean shows? And so long story short, after 53 Korean shows, I confidently can say that the algorithms worked on my account. With Planning 2050, we want that idea of the recommendation systems to capture all algorithms of good practices that work for specific cities or communities. In the Planning 2050 dashboard platform, the signatories go in there and report their progress on their goals and strategies. And when they're reporting above the expected minimum, they're generating a good practice worth to be replicated or be scaled by other city or community, or the other way around, right? The most practical and successful solutions can be recommended to your specific city or community, depending on its size or climate zone or any other similar aspect that will be embedded in the data within the platform. We launched this platform just a few months back. It is currently being tested by all the original 7 signatories. Those 7 signatories believed in the idea since the beginning. They all agree with ensuring that their critical systems, and this is a very important word in the mission statement, that these systems are resilient, carbon neutral or better, and equitable by 2050. All this through the implementation of actionable commitments, which is what I mentioned before, right? That the Planning 2050 platform is tracking and generating that database of replicable and scalable actions. And in our framework, we call those LISAs and LIRAs, which are 2 acronyms for large impact scalable actions and large impact replicable actions. The LISAs and LIRAs idea comes from the systems theory. If you imagine this analogy that tells you that the graphite and the diamond are exactly the same thing, they're both carbon atoms, right? But the difference is the final product produced by how those carbon atoms are holding hands. Don't get any ideas for Christmas presents just yet, but if you want to save money, now you can argue that giving a pencil is almost the same as giving a diamond ring. But joking aside, if you take that analogy to the city or community level, right? Imagine that your atoms are those systems that make your community, say transportation systems, drainage systems, ecological systems, health, economical, social systems, all of this interacting with each other. But what it makes the final successful product is how the systems produce synergies between them, right? To generate either diamond or graphite cities. Those actions of engaging and collaborating, those are what we call the leases and LIRAs, the best practices that are worth replicating or scaling. On top of generating that database, we're creating something that planning practice is really strongly encouraging nowadays, right? Is to really use the future to plan. But it's not to plan just in the present for the future, is to continue in its implementation, continue monitoring and adapting on the fly. Our leases and LIRAs are intended to do this, continually prove success on specific actions and practices that work and do not create unintended consequences. But if they do create those unintended consequences, we want to track them and rapidly adapt to those. So we can only do that with data and with a multidisciplinary approach to all things in the future. Since 2022, the leaders from this organization supported the Planning 2050 initiative, forming together the founding advisory board. And the problem we face today is not only local, it's also global. So we have a global presence with support of international entities and experts in the planning profession, as you can see. So I'm going to leave it there. But if you got inspired, I hope you are. If you really want to make a difference in your community or your profession, we have openings within this community of volunteers. I hope you want to get involved with either our outreach committee or communications committee. There are various ways to get involved, so just please follow us on social media or reach out directly to me, screenshot this page, and help us to continue transforming the cities and communities we live in. Thank you so much, Scott.
Hey, Scott, can you unmute yourself? Oh, here we go.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you, Julio. That was a fascinating presentation on next generation practice and platforms. In this next presentation, I'm going to describe 10 best approach practices for shifting from net negative to regenerative. These were developed in recent work with the APA Division's URAG group as part of the sustainability guidelines, which are focused on how to build back better with sustainability in mind. Now, they're one whole answer to what might constitute a new sustainability approach that builds off and leverages traditional urban planning to address some core problems of sustainability and points towards new city form and function. We use BAPs to shift our approach from our traditional linear mindset, technology, and metabolism to a new regenerative living systems mindset, technology, and metabolism, since the core sustainability challenge is not simply technical innovation. BNPs 1 and 2 directly address regenerative urban planning and design, while the other 8 are required for complete success. In number 1, we start changing our approach by planning and designing to the performance imperatives of system sustainability, continuously innovating to ultimate success, and taking a strategic approach and using whole systems engineering. In 2, we create the regenerative built environment as the foundation for a regenerative city region, and we'll look at some of the sub-practices there in a moment. In BAP 3, we harden the socioeconomic systems of cities and regions to defend against the increasingly destructive conditions during a long period of climate system recalibration. In BAP 4, we restore nature, but we do so in the context of the new nature that's arising from climate changing ecosystems. In 5, we create the planning processes, infrastructure, and decision intelligence needed for regenerative city success and to address barriers across the whole system. In 6, we plan, design, and build to the new context and conditions of a destabilizing climate and ecosystems, not our familiar and stable past patterns. In 7, we also harness the power of the market's price system and the legal system to reverse trends and accelerate the transition to an abundant, regenerative, ecological economy. In 8, we continuously innovate to needed systems performance with different streams of R&D innovation at the right level and with the right actors: project level, plan level, universities, industry, state, nation policy. In 9, we design new governance modes and vehicles when needed. And in 10, we use full cost assessment and 10-year budgeting to choose and fund the regenerative options. Now we'll review a few of the sub-practices in number 2, creating the regenerative built environment as the foundation of a regenerative city, region, and economy. 2.1, we shift to a regenerative approach immediately using existing budgets to fund regenerative options that exist now in planning, design, and infrastructure and O&M and other municipal operations. But to do so, we must be educated consumers. We need to learn about this approach. With 2.2, we reinvent the comprehensive plan as a strategic regenerative city plan, and then prepare one. And it would have characteristics such as extending the planning horizon to 100 years, so you can see the full cycle of processes, and use an accurate future baseline scenario for decision making. In 2.3, we identify and make the big regenerative context shaping moves that we've just talked about earlier. In 2.4, we extend this approach to the whole city to create complete regenerative livable spaces. And we'd include all the components. These are familiar characteristics, including visioning and developing other performance imperatives, using living community patterns, engaging stakeholders, optimizing desired system performance for primary urban systems of land use density and transportation, and include physical impact analysis and financing plans to fully fund the needed infrastructure and services. 2.5, we expand the focus from the new development to creating regenerative performance of existing development, as Vatsal was talking about, which is one of the biggest problems right now. Obviously, it generates all the impacts. We build resilience, community, and justice through the planning process, and we use modern GIS, et cetera, like we've discussed already. Now, this presentation is a new approach for Ukraine's and any other jurisdictions' opportunity and path to success. That is leapfrogging to climate change and sustainability access by rebuilding a regenerative built environment, which also creates the core foundation of the circular ecological economy of sustainability. In doing so, Ukraine and other jurisdictions become a global beacon of success by eliminating GHGs, and more so by creating the ecological economy needed for continued regenerative development and prosperity, and which is also the basis for successful climate change collaboration. With that, we're going to shift to the symposium's next section, the panel discussion and audience Q&A. Today, we've been describing substantial programs and approaches to urban sustainability in the context of progress to date, which appears insufficient for getting to climate and sustainability success, at least in time, and also in the context of the arc of urban sustainability innovation pointing towards the ecological economic city. That will not automatically arise, but will arise if we plan, design, and build it. Having heard our presentations together as an ensemble, we've got a few questions, but first I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let the panelists turn on their videos. And just ask the panelists just generally to start off, after having heard all of our presentations, because this is the first time we've actually heard each of our presentations, as an ensemble, what kind of points stood out for you? And or were there any points that you wanted to underscore a little further? Or did you have any intriguing insights you'd like to consider together now? So I think we can unmute our mics. And just wondering if anybody'd like to jump in on what you heard coming out of all this, hearing it all together? Vatsal, please, everybody can unmute their mics, please.
Yeah, I think Scott, again, you, Carla, Kirstin, and team have put together a very interesting panel for us to discuss. I think we as planners look into some of these complex issues as unmanageable, and some of us think, yes, it can be done. Everything can be tidy and clean in some time near future. So I think it's a process between those two things. And I think we all can take baby steps depending upon whatever problem that we as planners are tackling. And priorities and guidelines and practices that we all highlighted, Julio highlighted the data-related discussion. I think all those things are tools for us to take it forward in a stride that is very applicable to our own issue that we are tackling. Charles also highlighted that kind of thing, that at a specific juncture, they could use 1, 2, 3 aspects, and in the second one, they could use something else. So I think it's a mesh of ideas, mesh of practically doable things. And I think Bruce or somebody asked a question about the affordability part of it. I think it boils down everything to that. And that's where I highlighted many of these case studies that are doing things on the ground. Again, everything is not practical for everybody, but I think it's a one step at a time. And that's a very broad, very general thought process that I have tried to implement in my last 25 years of working on all these aspects. Thank you.
Love that, Vatsal, because that reflection kind of says a lot about the complexity of this, right? There's a lot of pieces coming together at one point. It's not easy. It's not an easy task. The multidisciplinary approach in our practices in design and in planning is very important to this. I want to touch really quick on one of the questions by Bruce, which is somehow very often occurrence in my practice, which is he's asking about often developers or clients in general push back against the environmental or sustainable practices because they're more expensive and whatnot, and they keep pushing all this extra arguments against it. And I can say that in my practice, I work in West Texas communities, which are very conservative communities that don't really like the word sustainable at all. And so that's fascinating for planners, especially because you can bring into the conversation the idea of healthy living or walkable communities and things that can avoid those words that are red flag words type of things. But that's a very fascinating exercise for planners actually to go through that and still deliver sustainable products without really using the word sustainable. And so I wanted to touch on that because at the end, nobody goes against healthy cities or nobody goes against safe cities and those type of topics that you can always go around those. As in fact, we're going to be part of a presentation in the APA Texas Convention next month, especially on that, Texas communities, how you can bring as a planner, a good approach and good practices for sustainable communities.
Julio and Vatsal, those are great points. I'd like to jump in here and just add that another aspect of this, the affordability issue on these practices, is how affordable is it to go over the cliff of climate change, right? Like if all of our practices are affordable, but they point us in the direction of climate catastrophe, how affordable really is that? And I think most economists would argue that you've got an externality problem. So in fact, market prices are basically too low relative to the actual costs involved, which are not reflected in the market prices. And in preparing the paper that I prepared, or the section for the URAG guidelines, I was heartened to find some new economic tools being developed. This one was up in Canada that allow for the estimation of those nature systems values, those externalities, integrated into decision tools for public sector and for developers, for that matter. And so, to a large degree, this idea that the sustainability option is too expensive or more expensive is actually just not true. if you're an economist and you're looking at actual economic value. True, it's true in terms of nominal prices, but that's what's pushing us over the edge. And so I think it's important that we add that component to these proposals when we bring them forward. Could
I jump in, Scott?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to answer, also to address Scott Bruce Stiftel's question. My old friend Bruce, who I haven't seen in years, from Georgia Tech. It's a great question, and Scott, you're right. We need to think about a new way of thinking about affordability, but it does suggest how we need to work on changing the incentive structures, right? So we're trying to figure out now how to get folks to save trees in cities, and a strong tree code is one way to do it, but maybe that property owner ought to be able to get some credit for saving trees that provide shade, evapotranspiration, birds, ecosystem benefits for the larger neighborhood and the larger city. So we've been looking and haven't been finding very many examples of this, but how can we adjust our property tax system, for example, so that you might have a lower assessment or a lower tax bill because you've taken actions to conserve things that we're all benefiting from. Other thing I might say is that the question about whether developers or folks are going to spend more money to save nature, we have a lot of case studies, and we've got a film, for example, about a project called Bryant Heights in Seattle, where they started with conserving the trees and the forests, and they achieved the same density and created a tree-friendly product that is more desirable, preferable than cutting down the trees, which is the kind of the usual way developers start. So anyway, yeah, it's a really important question. We've got to figure it out, and we've got to do some things at the local level to change the incentive structure, I think.
Well, exactly. Tim, just to echo that point, the value added often comes after you actually kind of force attention to the issue and apply a creative new configuration, as Charles knows so well. So Charles, take it away.
Well, I was just going to say that if your economy is not delivering these results, then you need and you can't convince everyone to change the economy, then you need to have sort of, I call them third-party entities, or like coordinating entities like the UDCK in Japan. And the urban design center concept in Japan is proliferating wildly. Like, it's multiplying. It started in Kashimonoha, and it's proliferating to all these small towns who are in recovery and needing a way to collaborate and share costs to uplift their goals, within the economy. And I know that Scott and I get into this debate about, well, why are you enabling people in the economy to just navigate around the flaws of it? Why don't we just change the economy? And I think that, everyone's in recovery, right? They're just not, they're all sipping off this economy. And they need to get out of recovery and go into, UDCs and third-party entities and start rebuilding our economy.
Great points, Charles. Kirstin, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
Yeah, just briefly. What I kind of see happening, and it's very encouraging, although like you pointed out, Scott, there's so much more to be done. But there is more of an openness to planting these seeds of these concepts, and then not being so stuck on just one of them that it's either my way or the highway type of thing. What I see is there is more of these sparks of a creative process where we have to make these new alliances with maybe some of the panelists we're talking about. We wouldn't normally be our natural, friend, but we have to work together because we all get it now. This is serious, and we don't really have very much time to figure it out. So if we're not inspired by EcoCity or resilient, we might be inspired by self-reliant, or healthy. And so I think right now we're getting past all of getting stuck just in one silo. And I think that's going to be the key to really unlock a lot more success upcoming. So I think it's exciting. Thank you.
Excellent points. On that note, I do look at the time here. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I think it's time to shift to audience Q&A, which Kirstin is going to host for us.
Yeah, and I apologize. There's a lot of really great questions coming in, and we won't be able to get to all of them. But the energy in the room is high, and I'm loving it. And I'm about to cut you down with my first question, so I'm warning you now. Just being realistic here, and I had this question, and then I saw it come through. So in many parts of the country, you can't say the word sustainability without pushback still, right? Like I will have people after this webinar even write in the comments, oh, here's more left-wing rhetoric. Are we just gonna put them aside, put it all aside? Are we going to try to convince folks or try to show them the importance of all of this? Are we ever going to convince them? Do we need to now find ways in which to work around them? How do we handle it? Because it's still happening.
That's a great question, Kirstin, and definitely a pervasive one. I think Julio kind of hit on one particular approach, just in terms of not using the word, and actually when you're working with communities, working with them to based on their values and their words and their point of view. And so I think that's definitely an essential component. I think bringing in the economics is another component. But let me ask the rest of our panelists here if anybody else has some other ideas as well.
I find some success in talking about adaptation and the hazards that people are experiencing in their lives, and getting people to acknowledge that there's something they can do with somebody else to relieve that pain point of that hazard, and really be thinking about it as a means to have a conversation about, did your power go out for the third time? And starting to have a conversation, that's where it has to begin. Is that we all live on this planet and we're all experiencing the same trauma.
Excellent point. I might add that Kirstin, sort of behind that question is kind of the larger question, which I thought about as the panelists were talking, which is how do we institutionalize this approach? And that kind of gets to the role of our professional organizations, and maybe to some process that we haven't even thought about yet. So I think it's an excellent question. I'm not going to pretend like we all have the answer and the silver bullet on that one, but it's definitely a struggle that we all face. Kirstin.
Yeah, just quickly, what I'm seeing here, I grew up here in Missoula, Montana. It's a very conservative state, and then recently moved back, and just starting to get more familiar with, how people are perceiving these different challenges and how to make changes. And it really seems like this idea of self-reliance, of individuals being able to take care of themselves or take care of their family and their neighbors is something that resonates. And the communities that are sort of like starting to get more engaged are those that are, have people that they know are working in trades like plumbing, heating, landscaping, and connecting those types of jobs and opportunities with upgrading and making sure that everybody has a comfortable home, like that can withstand heat and, cold too. So it's like, what I see is like a very practical, bottom-up sort of resonance in some of these topics. Thanks.
Nice.
Vatsal's had his hand up too. I think he wants to comment.
Oh, Vatsal, please jump in.
Thank you. I think let me try to bring in my work on energy economics for all these years. I think life cycle analysis is a very simple tool. Scott, you and many others highlighted this concept, but I think life cycle analysis, if at all we do it, I think that's where we can get the actual cost. Most of us are worried about capital investment cost. And That's not the only thing. It's about the life cycle analysis. And in our field, there was a Stern report that came out from UK almost 10 years ago on energy and economics, doing it for United Kingdom. And I think that's where everybody realized the value of looking into life cycle analysis from the energy economics, climate policy kind of mitigation policy kind of discussion. So I think life cycle analysis is a good way for us to look into many of these investments. And again, urban level investments are stranded assets for a long time. So if at all we do those kind of analysis and then invest, I think that is where we can get a larger output. Last point I wanted to make about the developers and all. Right now, green finance has become a big thing. Right now, the reporting has become a big thing, ESG, and even Securities Exchange Commission has come up with their guidelines. So I think so much is now driving towards at least reporting. And what we have seen, if at all we talk about reporting, then the delta from that report is always people are going to ask and investors are going to ask. So I think that is where a lot of this change is happening globally. And I think it's a great small step in that direction.
Vatsal, that's a great point. And I think we're going to probably need to end on that. I've got 10:28. I would just like to close out by thanking the audience for their time today. I'd like to thank our panelists for a tremendously rich set of presentations and discussions, which are really pointing the way towards a lot of hope and things that we can all do right now. I mean, we can all join Vatsal's Lead in Community program. We can, jump into this stuff very quickly. And what I'd also like to say to the audience is, and on these questions, is that we're going to take a look at all the questions that came in today and try to provide a set of coherent responses and some additional resources to support the audience in moving forward. And then maybe even follow up with a post session survey as well. So please stay tuned and we'll keep you posted. And I'd like to thank our host, Kirstin, as well as Carla and Tim Van App and the rest of the working group in the International Division for the support in putting this on. I'd like to wish everybody an excellent and safe rest of the day. And on that note, thank you very much. Kirstin, you can take us out.
Just don't forget to log those CM credits, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel probably sometime on Monday. And you can get that at youtube.com/planningwebcast.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirstin.